Hello, it's Denise from Women Beyond a Certain Age. We have a wonderful network of women who were friends of mine and that have been clients of mine and then have been on the podcast. And the network keeps growing. And today it's really, really fun for me because our guest is Maria A. Brown, and she was referred to us from a previous podcast guest. So, Maria, thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm really privileged and honored that you would invite me. Thank you so much.
Now, I'm going to read Maria. It's easier for me to say nice things about you than you will ever say about yourself.
Then just read through the whole podcast, please.
All I'm going to do is read all your credits so that people can be impressed. No, I'm going to read. I love what you have written at the top of your resume. Creative writer and co-executive producer. Successful television writer for over 30 years. Started in film doing script analysis for director Barry Levinson, who encouraged you to consider a writing career. Now that's huge.
I know. I'm telling you, that was the most biggest blessing of my life. I started right out of college, right out of the gate. I got hired into film. So not many people can say that. So I definitely a blessing.
And one of the things that's really apparent after having done, I think we've done almost 300 of these podcasts in the past couple of years, is there are moments, and everyone, not just women, but there are moments in life that change your life. Do you know what I mean? They send you on different paths. So being hired by someone like Barry Levinson and then him believing in you.
Oh, it's a wonderful story. May I tell you a tiny bit of it?
Please.
So when I graduated college, I was very fortunate that a friend of my dad's worked for Barry Levinson as his assistant. So they went to do Good Morning Vietnam. I know. And they asked me to come work in the office. Keep in mind, I was a transplant. I'd only been here a few years from England. So the talent I worked with, I didn't really know or understand. Like Robin Williams, I had no idea the brilliance of Robin Williams when I got to meet him. So I did script synopses for Barry, script coverage. And when he came back from Thailand, he said to me, I'm going to do a sitcom. And I love your writing as far as coverage. Would you like to be a writer's assistant? And I was clueless, right? I didn't even know what that meant. And I told him that. And he said, I have faith in you. You can do this. So I was brought onto a show called Harry with Alan Arkin. Amazing cast. It all fell apart. It absolutely fell apart. The writers and actors were so fractured, we didn't speak for a while. And everybody quit. All the writers quit. So Barry and I got to write scenes together for Richard Lewis, rest in peace. And so that was my start into the world really of sitcoms and writing. I had no idea. I thought if I was a teacher, I'd kind of made it. I mean, I came from that kind of background, or an executive assistant. So how fabulous that I went, wow, it's a cliche, but the world really is mine for the taking.
It's incredible. It's wonderful. We're going to get to what you're working on, because I hope that a lot of those stories are in one of the pilots that you're working on. Now, let me say this. You transitioned into television, where I had the good fortune to work on Emmy-nominated shows such as Mad About You and Just Shoot Me, two of my favorite shows.
Oh, thank you.
And you received a Golden Globe Award for the comedy CYBIL. Huge. Have had the great fortune of being paid to laugh for a living. Now that could be on your tombstone, couldn't it, Maria? I mean, for people to be able to say that, I always say that, I feel blessed because I got the career I wanted. Do you know what I mean? I worked 40 years. I ran my own business. We worked in television. I got to write cookbooks. I mean, I got to do what I wanted to do. And when that happens, I think you're the luckiest person in the world. I mean, good for you. It's amazing.
I remember saying per that, some of my friends, obviously doctors and lawyers, and I'd felt at the time that what they were doing societally was so much bigger and so much more, well, of the service nature. And I remember saying, I don't think I do that. And then for them to point out, hang on, you entertain and make people laugh. How is that not a service? And it never occurred to me, because it felt like, well, I'm a writer on a sitcom. I don't do anything magnificent to change people's lives. So that was a beautiful thing for me to hear, because I tended to talk down what I was
understand. When in food styling, Maria, sometimes I did, and they still, in movies we did some scenes, but in television, the food was an integral part to funny kitchen scenes. Do you know what I mean? Or restaurant scenes. But I know what you mean, because sometimes the longer I did it, I'd think to myself, I've made a lot of people rich, meaning lean cuisine.
Yeah.
Big companies like that.
Yeah.
But you know what? I promoted sales and I loved it and it worked for me. So you have to realize that everything we're doing is of value to someone. And you made people laugh. How wonderful.
There's this element, and I think, probably a majority of people listening have experienced it, that imposter syndrome.
Yes.
So that notion, I never thought I'd write comedy. I'll tell you something. I've never told this. When I was at Loyola and I did my first comedy, well, it was a writing class, but he said, write a comedy. And my style was very British. I was told by my writing teacher, you'll never make a career in comedy, stick to drama. So that was in my head at the age, I went to college at 16. That was in my head from the age of 16 on, that this was not going to be a field. So I stuck with the drama. So I've always felt this little bit of a chip on my shoulder that I'm not supposed to be doing this. So overcoming that has been one of the greatest achievements, realizing I am worthy, I can make people laugh. And no matter what, I'm not a stand-up comic, but I can define characters and make the characters interesting. So I think overcoming imposter syndrome in society at large is one of the greatest things we need to do.
And I don't know if men have imposter syndrome as much as women. We know that, I don't know, and this is just me. I've been married, my second husband, we've been married for 31 years. I question things, Maria, about life, myself, other women, children, whatever. I don't know if he ever has any of those questions.
There's a wonderful quote. I don't remember who said it, but she said, I wish I had the confidence of a mediocre white man.
Wow. Okay.
Isn't that brilliant?
That is brilliant. That's actually worth learning to embroider and putting on a pillow.
I wish I could give credit for that.
I love it. I think that's absolutely brilliant. Now, the reason our friend Colleen suggested, Colleen is from Tuscan Women Cook, and if people don't know, and she runs tours to, she's kind of like the original Pasta Grani. She runs tours to Italy and wonderful cooking classes. So when she sent me the email saying, Denise, you have to read this article from my friend Maria, and I think she'd make a wonderful podcast guest. That's how and I emailed you immediately. And I know you're busy because I'm sure you're writing and you're trying to sell something and you're working on stuff. People don't realize how much time and energy it takes, Maria. That's what people don't. Do you know what I mean? One of the reasons when I saw your credits, when I was in catering before I branched into food styling, we did food. I had a beautiful commercial kitchen in Culver City, and we delivered lunch every day to the writer's room at Mad About You at the old Selznick studio. That was one that was in, and I used to say, and they were so funny because they were hungry and, they were tired and they would eat everything. And
we spend all our lives sitting in a chair in a room with people. So those little highlights generally are food. That's the highlight.
It really was. And we did a lot of work on the Tonight Show, and I would just bring treats because Jay Leno was very kind to me. And the writers, they were so fun. What kind of cookie was that? I mean, these guys, they were like geniuses, but you know what I mean? They could have been had for that cookie. I'm telling you, Maria.
I know one of the things as a female, I'm almost embarrassed to admit it because I've worked mainly with males, not with women. I remember going in the kitchen and seeing all the orders that the men would have, the Monte Cristos and the double cheeseburgers. And there I would be with my pathetic little salad with my dressing on the side. And I'm going to come back as a mediocre white man. That's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to have that freaking burger.
That's exactly right. I know it too well. Now, so I need to share with people this so they can look it up, our audience. This article that I read, and now having read some other work of Maria's, this appeared in the LA Times, LA Affairs Chronicle. That's what it says on the bottom. And it talks about, that's the column. So in the Times, you wrote this, and it says, "Back in the Saddle" is the name of the piece. "An Italian chef who heated up my cold and lonely world." So you tell us. I read it. I have a couple of things I'm going to read out of it, just one or two little lines, because well, tell us why you wrote this, because that's a big deal.
You know, I've never written articles before. Colleen encouraged me because she gets the LA Times. And she said, so I said, I wrote 2 articles. I wrote one for ARP because one of my girlfriends, who's a multi-Emmy winning writer on Sex and the City, said, why don't you submit an article? And it was easy. It was basically a long paragraph. And that was the first thing I submitted about my first trip over 50 to a plastic surgeon. Happy to talk about that because that's hysterical. And then they accepted that. And then my second one was the LA Times article. The reason I'm writing these, or the reason I'm working on this type of material is, and this is, I'm so happy and proud to say this, I was married almost 30 years. I figured that was the rest of my life. It was kind of joyless. And when I came out of the marriage, obviously it was brutally painful, but I didn't even know if I was attractive anymore.
Of course.
But I didn't know it. So
of course.
When I realized a few months after my separation and I started to go out that I was an attractive woman who had things to offer, I was kind of blown away. So this is my way. I've got many of these stories of really reinforcing that women of any age can have these experiences. I'm having more fun. I'm almost 60. I'm having more fun now than I ever did in my 20s. Dating hotter men, not that that is the be all and end all, but as a writer, it's kind of fun, than I ever did in my 20s. I mean, I have a pitch deck I'm working on. It's all hot men with abs. It's insane. So I want women to know.
You're doing it, Maria. That's the difference. Do you know? I know.
I do.
And I'm not, I say this to friends of mine all the time. People, women are widowed. Women get divorced. I mean, we all do. Men, and I have male friends are the same thing. And I have male friends that are in their 60s, almost 70. And you know what? They break up with someone and they go out and find another girlfriend.
My ex did the exact same. Immediately.
Now, I have to tell you, my husband is a darling. I love him to death. And second marriages are, of course, very different. But I'm just saying, if I die, my husband will be in mourning for almost a month before he finds another girlfriend.
They can't live alone. They're little children.
But I have to tell you something. He's always been that way.
Men need to be taken care of. It's different.
He likes being in a monogamous relationship. He likes being the protector. He likes being, so, but I see it in people. But for you to get out there, which is when writing this article is so fabulous, for you to get out there and talk about it is wonderful. I say to people, it's wonderful. Now I have to read. I'm just going to read this one thing because I think it's so precious. And then, so you're going to go more about this.
Yes.
He took my hand and led me to the bedroom. I looked at the bed and briefly wondered if the sheets were clean. As a mom, I could get stains out of anything. My domestic reverie was cut short as he took off his shirt. I looked at his ridiculous body and I knew it was my turn. I also knew I wasn't ready. I got into bed fully clothed and he crawled in next to me. I think that's the most fabulous paragraph I've ever read.
You know, it's interesting because the night before I had been, thank you, by the way, I had been with a girlfriend and I said, I just want to meet a hot man on the Friday night. I said, I just want to meet a hot man. I put it out there. I said, I just need to feel like a woman. I mean, even though men cannot make us feel that way, they can certainly empower us in certain ways, right? To make us feel attractive. Validation was big for me. Absolutely. So when I met this man, and I had to use his real name, which was Daniello, which was really awkward because I was surprised I didn't hear from him actually. I met him and it was exactly as I put in the article. that was the most romantic night, one of the most romantic nights I'd ever experienced. To be held by a man and dance and have him sing to me in Italian while I drank Prosecco is right out of, Under the Tuscan Sun. It's right out of a movie. And my girlfriend was with me at the time. She had the worst experience getting home. Her story is hysterical, but mine was just affirming. And then, this is petty, I went home the next day in the same nightclub clothes that I went out in, and my ex was at the house. So I walked in at 10 a.m. in nightclub clothes, passed him, went straight to bed, and it felt like a very minor, superficial victory.
Of course it was. He witnessed your walk of shame in fact, became a walk of power.
It was a powerful and prideful walk. And it's happened to me numerous times. That's why, again, encourage women. Positive attitude, first of all.
Yes.
I've gone out with girlfriends of my age and we'll sit in a restaurant and they have that sour face and they'll say, I don't know why I can't meet anybody. And I want to say, well, do you see yourself right now? Perhaps if you just smiled and knew you would, it would change your life. But that's a hard thing to say to people. But it is about what you reflect.
But you know what? You're so right, Maria. And here's, when I was between husbands, I had 13 years. So I dated different people. Sometimes I was building my career. I was really busy. I worked long hours. But the best thing that ever happened to me was a much older man, I was 38 or 39. So I kept attracting these 70-year-old guys.
Interesting.
I know. And the reason I tell you this is that people talked on the phone a lot more then. So we would talk on the phone, or they would ask me out on a date, and we'll meet on Tuesday and have dinner, whatever. But once, the most unattractive man I'd ever met said to me on the phone, he'd asked me out. We went on dinner. He called me back for a second date. Now, during dinner, he must have told me 15 times that he owned half of Beverlywood. Okay. I mean, he kept going on. And he was very nice. There's nothing wrong. But I'm talking a 70-year-old man who'd been bald for 30 years, who was obese, and who wore the most hideous shirt I've ever seen. And okay, so that's the setup. Now, he calls me and asks me out for dinner again. I said, I'm not interested. Thanks, though. That was lovely of you. Thank you for calling me back. And he said to me, you know what? You're not all that cute. So had to immediately, because I didn't want to go out with him again, had to immediately slam me. And like you were saying, when you're out to self-esteem at any age for most women, and especially in a romance department, oh God, there's so many issues that we can't even touch on that. You know what I mean? And
because one of the problems is we achieve our self-esteem from external forces.
Yes.
And that is our big mistake. Obviously, self-worth is within, but our self-esteem, we project and we look out there and we get that validation and we have self-esteem.
And why do we do that? Because that's what our society teaches us over and over and over again.
And platforms and social network, everything.
All of it. Also. Or, a guy who kicks a football for a living, telling us what our value is. I mean, we have horrible messages but what was good about that man saying that to me is I thought, buddy, I may not be cute forever, but I'm cute enough now that I'm not going on a date.
And great that you said that and recognized it. So I've had the absolute opposite experience. I've dated, because I think the wonderful thing about dating as a writer is there's not a single date wasted.
Oh, no.
So that has been revelatory in that even if it's not the greatest date, if it's boring or the man has nothing to offer, I always have material. But beyond that, 90% of the men I've dated have been 30. I've dated and I've dated hundreds of men. I'm proud to say now. Good
for you.
And my first COVID partner, was 28. And I actually messaged him and said, thank you for the because it was a dating app, but you're far too young for me. And he persisted. And it was the most powerful relationship because it was my first also sexual experience post my marriage. And it was 28-year-old. And he made me feel powerful and sexy and valued. And he was also did a lot of mind messing up too, because I assume once you'd had sex with someone, you were partners.
I know.
I was messaging him, why haven't I heard from you today? What's going on with us? I didn't realize that culturally that wasn't about to happen between a 28-year-old man and a mid-50s woman. But my experiences have been really affirming with young men who love an older woman because she wants nothing from them.
There you go.
I don't need anything. I don't need money. I really don't need affirmations anymore. I'm not going to get pregnant.
That's
don't
right.
want to get married. I'm not going to trap them. So it's been phenomenal for them. And I have to also say proudly, 60% are still in my life. They text me every now and again and say, we're just checking in with you. I talked to 3 guys today I've known for 3 years who still would love to see me. Okay. So I did something right.
This is a course. Do you realize this? It's a course, Maria, or a TEDx speech. I don't know what. This is a course that you could teach to women. It really is about, but I think this in everything in life. It's attitude. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's attitude, and also seeing the signs and learning the lesson. Yes. So during this terrible, I know this. I've been divorced once and I wanted out and it was my idea. But divorce, and people that are listening to this, because mostly our audience is women, but a lot of them are 40 and up, different ages. Divorce is hard.
Oh, it's
crushing.
Painful, yes.
It's crushing. It's painful. It's frightening. So now, is that what you're writing about now? You're developing a series about my post-divorce after 28 years of marriage. Are you working on an idea with that?
I am. It's interesting that you asked that particular question, because my agent has said people don't really want to hear about divorce.
I think, okay, now I have to tell you, you know this from the shows you've seen that have had full of talent and absolutely failed. And you've seen, Cindy and I wrote 9 books, 9 food books. Some were cookbooks, some are how to start a catering business, how to be a personal chef. Now, you know what? For all 9 of those books, when I suggested to my agent the proposal that I was working on, they would all say, oh, and I had great agents. Oh, I don't know if that's going to sell. If all the negative stuff that people say to you, if we don't deflect it, you know what I mean? I'm not saying your agent's wrong, but you know what? I disagree. I think, how many people are divorced in America?
And I also, to your point, in order to celebrate the highs in anything, you have to acknowledge the lows and go through the lows, so that it's like coming out of the ashes, isn't it really?
That's right.
I'd been a successful writer for 30 years. And when I separated from my husband, I tried to get my first credit card. I was denied. And I'd made twice as much money our whole married life. My husband's wonderful, ex-husband.
Yeah, no, I get it.
I couldn't use miles on the credit card because I wasn't the primary card holder. So I didn't. I know.
Shocking.
We had a leak in the house. I didn't know where the main water valve was. I didn't know how to light a fire. I didn't know we had a checking account. I didn't know. I'd been with him 30 years. I didn't know how much money we had. I gave him my power. I was working 70-hour weeks. I was raising 3 children, raising a husband, keeping a house. And I just handed everything off, handed my checks. So when that moment came where I did not know he was going to say, I thought he was going to say, let's get help. And he said, let's get divorced. Devastating. I always assumed that the person I'd be with would at least attempt to save rather than toss out. It was devastating. So for me then to go through all that pain of not knowing about money or checking accounts or getting a credit card, or I couldn't even renew the lease on my Mercedes It was humbling. I was so vulnerable.
Yes.
And that was close to rock bottom.
Of course. But is this new? No, women have been doing this for years. Do you know what I mean? For years.
You feel like you're the first one going through it. Same when you have a baby, you feel like you're the first person. How did nobody tell me how hard this is? And it's the same with divorce. How do I not know how to pick myself up and open that door and do day one?
One of the best things that anyone ever said to me, I was at Elizabeth Taylor's house. I'd worked on her big fundraisers for AIDS. I worked with her a couple of times, but something came up and I said, well, she said, I was married. She said, is this your first marriage? And I said, no, Miss Taylor, this is my second marriage. Sometimes I forget it was so long ago. And of course, still in that generation, it was embarrassing to say that I'd gotten divorced from my, what I mean? I was embarrassed that the marriage had failed.
And you become a statistic.
Yes. And she said, you're looking at me. She was so dark in that little breath. You're looking at me. She said, I married every one of them.
She did.
She goes, when I look back now, she goes, I thought I had to marry every one of them.
I wonder
and
why.
when she said that, I thought, of course she did. Do you know what I mean? Because she saw people around her and her age group, everybody was married. So she thought she had to marry every one of them. And I remember I drove home from her house that day and I thought, that's something to remember about our place in society, how we're treated, what we see.
Yes.
Our vision is sometimes limited because of our experiences, but sometimes they're just limited to what we do to ourselves.
Well, we also have this societal feeling that in order to be whole, you have to have that significant other.
Of course,
we know now, having gotten to certain ages, that anybody else is going to add to my joy and add to my happiness and add to my wholeness. They will never complete me. And that's a massive thing that we need to also teach our children.
It is, and male, boys and girls. That's exactly right. It doesn't. Absolutely. I have one or two girlfriends, Marie, at my age, that never did marry. Okay, they just never married. Now, they've had incredible lives.
Yeah.
But I know once in a while, several of them, most of them feel good about it. But once in a while, there's that kind of, oh, poor me, I never got married. And I say to them, I think you have a TV vision of marriage. I said, sweetie, if you're lonely in your marriage, now there's two people being lonely. If you're broke, now there's two people being broke. I said, marriage is a lot to do. It's a lot to work on.
You did say something that's really pivotal for me when I was watching. It was towards probably the last couple of years of my marriage. I think the last 10 we'd been waning, but I was in the car with my ex and we'd just seen a movie and we're both in the business. So I had this assumption that we'd have things to talk about.
Yes.
And I remember there was dead silence in the car and I had asked him a couple of questions and it was sort of shut down. And I was with my ex feeling more lonely than I ever had before. And that was a moment where you said, wow, to be with someone and feel so alone is not the way we're supposed to live our lives.
No. I have to read one more quote out of this. I'm reading this out of order, so people forgive me. But this is cute. You've met him in the club. This is still our article, Back in the Saddle, the Italian chef who heated up my cold and lonely world. Because the line in it is hysterical, Maria.
Thank you.
He suggested we go back to his apartment for Prosecco and more dancing. I did what any mid-50s woman would in my situation. I threw all reason and good sense and safety concerns to the wind and blurted out, yes. Because when I read that, I thought, I loved it so much because in my dating years, every once in a while you've met the person, a friend introduced you, there were not dating sites when I was young and dating, but there were groups called Great Expectations.
Yes.
And you went to the library and looked in these books of people's glossy 8x10s, and then you went on a date with them. And every once in a while, you're in the car with them, and I'm thinking, am I safe idea. So your line about that, I burst out laughing because I thought, and you overcame it. This was what's so brilliant.
When I went to Mexico with Colleen and a couple other friends, they had to have ground rules for me because I said yes to everything. So couldn't be out. I had a curfew. I certainly couldn't. If I went on a date, I had to be home at a certain time. No one could come back to the house we were staying in. And I did meet. Of course, I meet someone everywhere because it's about energy. And if you put up that energy of what's next, what's my next adventure, you're going to have one. Yes. So I met literally the guy in the restaurant who was serving us said, this is my WhatsApp number. And so we made a plan to see each other. And Colleen came looking for me because it was after 11. It was a tiny, tiny place, Punta Mita. They came looking for me. And she said, you're about to walk down a dark alley with a man you just met. Is this wise? She was completely right. But in the mindset I was in right then, there was no logic. It was all visceral feeling.
There you go. But see, we lose that as we age. And that's why I think it's so important that you got it back. I mean, you know, you got it back. We lose. I used to be fearless about everything. And I've seen it as I age. I mean, everything now I think, oh, do I want to go there? That's so far. I've been all over the world. And I think, oh, I'm not sure I want to go there alone. I never used to. I thought like that wouldn't even come into my head. So I think that your attitude and also going with learning about yourself. That's what you've been doing. You've been learning about yourself.
And I've always felt safe. I really do. I have a very strong faith with my higher power, strong belief. And I've always felt incredibly safe and very well taken care of. Have I made some mistakes and done some foolish things? Absolutely, I have. But they've all worked out fine. So when I was, again, in Mexico,
yes,
a surfer, a local had asked me to watch him surf. And then I had torn my rotator cuff in the airport on the way to Mexico. That's a different story. So I said, will you watch me in the water so I can swim because I love the water? And he asked me out on a date. So we went on a date. He wore the same clothes that he's worn all day, which was a swimsuit, which I thought was a little bit of a red flag. Didn't even have a top on. Then we went to his downtown. He went to a flea market and bought a purple wife beater shirt for $2, which I actually said to him, don't you want a neutral? No sense. And then on the date where I'd questioned him about his life and his children, he stood up and said, you have no idea what my life's like. I don't even know where I'm sleeping tonight. I'm homeless. I'd had my first date with a homeless man. Oh. He left me and I had no idea where I was. And the restaurant I was sitting at, which was just somebody's house, didn't speak any English. And I made it fine. I got back fine. But for me to meet someone who's homeless and have a date with them, again, when I eventually write that story, I'll make it more humorous because it's poignant as well.
Absolutely.
But again, me putting myself out there. You just never know
exactly right.
Who's going to add to your life, who's going to give you a story, going to brighten your life, going to teach you a lesson. Everybody has something to teach us. So never shut anybody down or out.
When you, Maria, after 30 years, and I know that I know how the business works a little bit. I mean, we were always on the fringe of it, but I know how television works. And I certainly I was involved in one or two people writing pilots, okay? Yes. And even making a pilot. One of them was my idea, and they hired a writer. It was a production company. That one we thought was really going to sell. I don't know if people realize how hard it is to sell a pilot. Yes. To sell any script.
Yes, no matter your experience.
Doesn't matter who you are.
Yes.
You know, years ago, and this was what I did, Linda Bloodworth Thomas we were connected because of a charity. And her husband, Harry, was a riot. And we were doing a big dinner for them. And the charity was, but the bottom line was, he got up to thank people for being so kind to him. And Designing Women was at its glory.
It's brilliant, brilliantly written. It's theatrical.
Glory. And they were such lovely people. But he told the story, said, well, I got up last Monday and I was heading out to the office. And Linda said, where are you going? You don't have to work today. And he said, if you keep giving away $1 million at a time to these charities, I got to go to work. And it was so charming and so funny. And they were so darling. Yeah. But I know that later on, when I ran into them again, and they were so charming. I said, what are you working on stuff? They said, Denise, nobody wants to play with us anymore because we're too old.
It's exactly right. Ageism is rampant.
And I thought, I mean,
Yeah.
oh my God. So it's I don't know that people realize it's a tough job that you accomplish what you've done, Maria. And also, I think it's good. I love AARP. I love reading articles in the Times. The Huffington Post would love a piece like this. The Huffington Post has Thrive, after Ariana sold the Huffington Post, but she still has thrive.com. She would love your writing.
Okay, that's a great idea. Thank you for that. Yes, and I hear you on that. I have a very talented friend who's significantly older than me, but about 15 years ago, she had worked with a wonderful showrunner who said, when I do my next show, you will be my second. So that was guaranteed. And then he got the show, and then she had to meet with ABC. Now, this is a woman who was aging gracefully, had let her hair go gray, wasn't particularly working out or taking care of various aspects, but was a beautiful, wise, talented woman. She met with ABC, and then she found out she did not have the position.
I get it.
And that is critical.
I know.
And bias and everything.
And it plays into exactly when we were talking about validation, how we feel about ourselves. I've worked with talent. So most of them, it was the food show. Now, and what would happen, Maria, as actresses, and you know some of them, as actresses they were no longer the leads, okay? So they write a cookbook. And I wrote a piece about this in the Huffington Post. And I wrote, when you can no longer sell the jiggle, you sell the jello, and I didn't mean it all cruelly, but you could see women. I mean, I worked with a lot of them, they were great, but they weren't getting the roles that they wanted to get anymore. So they were lifestyle, flower arranging, meatloaf, whatever could still, get them some work.
The ultimate tragedy is, as we age, we have so much more to tell. We know ourselves better, and our stories only get more interesting.
Much more interesting.
So, for example, when you're pitching in a room, the first thing they'll say is, we want you to pitch from your real life. They always say that. Well, when I was working 60, 70 hours and raising kids with my husband, I didn't have a story to tell. I had to just fabricate and use my imagination.
Yes.
This is quite honestly the first time in my life where I have a story to tell, and it's a doozy. It's uplifting, it's tragic, it's beautiful, it's sexy, it's hot. And I really need to tell the story so that women can say, wow, life is never over at any age.
That's right.
Yeah. So that's what I would say. The network now is the time where I want somebody to hear my stories, because it doesn't really matter what age I am. I'm evolving and I'm growing up more fully and living life more deeply. And that's right. What it's about. And I didn't have the time to do that before. I was too busy.
Of course. And yet, old actors that are no longer really handsome are still, I mean, it's box office, it's money. I'm not being naive. Right. But sometimes when I go to the movies and it's a really old guy with a beautiful young woman, I say to my husband, I don't find that attractive.
I understand. I remember, and all due respect to Clint Eastwood, I remember seeing Bridges of Madison County. I think he was bathing or something, and he was looking out the window, and I remember thinking, it's all bone and sinew. I'm not quite getting this. And I mean, obviously he's a fabulous actor, but there was nothing lush or sexy or hot about watching him bathe. I just didn't understand it. And, that happens all the time. It's exactly what you know already. They have no qualms about placing an older man with a younger woman and making him seem desirable, regardless of actually how we feel. And yet we find the reverse isn't quite as true. However, that's what I've loved about living my new life, is I've gone out with so many young men and never felt older. I mean, I definitely have more experiences, but we've always found commonalities. And I think maturity has nothing to do with age either. I found men in their 30s as interesting, as positive, having stories to tell. I've gone out with a few older men, not many. They've either talked and bitched about their ex-wives and the problems where they have with their children, or they've talked about themselves to the point where they'll talk over me. That's been a big one. And I think you had mentioned that. One of them talked constantly about his phenomenal supermodel ex-wife and about his blossoming businesses everywhere. Whereas I've not found, I mean, obviously younger men don't have as much money. So that factors in. But I will say I've been more delighted dating younger men with their attitudes than generally older men who are set in their ways and still expect certain things from women. And I'm not about to fill that anymore. I'm not about to be at your beck and call and fill that niche that you're looking for. I want to be exactly. I want to contribute, but I'm not going to make you feel good about yourself.
Those are the rules that we were able to, when my husband and I, husband number 2, said, let's get married. There was a whole sort of verbalized exactly what you're talking about. What we were both looking for, what we didn't want to have again. Don't be pigeonholed into that, and it worked because we were pretty clear about that. And if, you have to there's boundaries, there's rules, there's boundaries, more, so you can be better at what you're doing.
You're communicating your expectations.
Would it be, Maria, with your situation, couldn't you write a book of these wonderful stories, and then someone might make a movie out of it?
I love that you brought that up. Thank you, first of all, because that's been brought up to me by my female writers as well, partly because there's so much more nuance that you can get across in a book and so much more detail, and perhaps because I've never done it, it might be more liberating for me, because in my own world, I know what I'm supposed to do structure-wise. So I'm a little bit inside a box knowing what they want. Whereas a book, I really don't have very much knowledge other than I read a lot. So there's a freedom to that. So I am considering that because it can be far more personal. I think show that subject to notes from everybody.
Okay. Your stories would easily make a book. And there's more memoir published now than ever before. And I just say this to you because what the little I've read of your work, but what I like, you could make this place beautiful. This memoir has been on the New York Times, and it's by Maggie Smith.
I love Maggie Smith.
Yes. And you know what? It doesn't have the structure that memoirs really do. I mean, some chapters are 3 paragraphs. The next paragraph is 10 pages. So I think someone like you, I think you could just adapt all the pilots and screenwriting you've done into a perfect memoir.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I like to be affirmed of that because that has crossed my mind lately.
And you put together a proposal. You already have an agent, but if you need a literary agent, they're hungry for it. They would be hungry for it, Maria.
I think also to get across the tragedy of divorce, but I won't vilify my ex-husband because my ex-husband is a marvelous man.
Good.
So that's also, when I wrote the first pilot about my separation, right after the separation, one of the lovely things was to not write one of those, mediocre, belittled men who are just sort of, I watch my language here, whose women have the upper hand, who basically control everything. I wanted to write a character who was my equal. I mean, things fell apart, but I think that's also important to portray marriage, divorce as a devastating thing without necessarily having to blame.
Absolutely.
I don't have to blame anymore.
Most people, I think, I don't know about other people. I know for me, as you get farther away from it, you look back, and I've been divorced for so many years, but after a few years you start to think, okay, and there isn't any blame left. And you don't have to say this was a mistake and this was this, or sometimes when people first, what you're talking about in writing, I say to them, I think it's too soon.
Yes.
I think you need more space between that.
But I'm also saddened that I would say the majority, if not all, of the women I know whom are divorced, they have nothing good to say.
I
about
know. I know.
ex. And I feel, for me, how will I ever stop loving my ex? We were together almost more than 30 years. We created 3 beautiful children, and we had, for a percentage of the time, a good life. So I will always love him for helping me grow in different ways and helping me raise these wonderful children who are, fabulous, best accomplishment. So I will always hold a special place for him. Yes, there's some sadness there too, and disappointment. But look at me now. I mean, I'm so much more new and improved and enlightened, and we're here to put life out. I mean, light.
Yes.
We're here to put light out.
I agree.
The more we generate that light and we listen to people's stories, the better life is, period. Writer or not a writer.
I have some very old divorce jokes, though, Maria, that I still use, and they work in a crowd. That's all I can say. But you're right. But that's like writing memoir, and that's like anything. When you can take yourself out of it and look at the scene, you can convey that to someone else. So that, you can do that.
Yeah, you have to look back and remember the good. That's one of the hardest things to do. That's exactly right. Generally look back, and not generally, well, I shouldn't even generalize that, but look back and remember the bad. I was with a person so long, there had to be a lot of good in there because I wasn't a fool. So
there you go. No, that's exactly.
I cry a lot. Yes, I cried a lot. This is very sad. I used to occasionally take pictures of myself crying to try and convince myself to get out of a relationship. And that's, because I'd say you need to look at these pictures of how sad you are right now. But I never had the strength. I would never have had the strength to divorce my ex. I was too vulnerable and too engrossed in just keeping the plate spinning and keeping the balls in the air. So he did me the greatest favor.
I was going to say.
Yeah, so painful as it was, when he said we should get divorced, you know what my first thought was? I don't know how to grill chicken. Instead of saying, you asshole, I've just given you the best years of my life, you asshole, I've given you the best kids. That's where my brain went. I don't know how to grill chicken. And he said, don't worry, I'll help you figure that out. But, it was incredible. I'm also proud to say I had written down, prior to this, we had planned a big conversation. I had written down pages and pages of beautiful things about him, of the reasons we were married and all the things that he did beautifully for and with me. And when he said, I think we should get divorced, I struggled through it, but I read them to him. And I'm really proud that I did that.
Now, Maria, I don't want to give you any more work, because I think, but that is what you were just talking about, is another TED talk. Okay. I'm serious.
Thank you.
To be able, and one of the reasons, and I say this to friends all the time, and a good friend said it to me when I first got divorced, still one of my best friends. I was saying something negative about my ex, and she turned to me and she said, Denise, I know him, and he was a really nice guy. And she just said, that doesn't sound right when you talk about him like that. Wow, and you know what? At the time, I was furious. Like the next day I called her up. I said, how dare you say that to me? And guess, you know what? Of course, 6 months later, I thought she's absolutely right. It's hard. It's hard to grow up.
In those first 6 months to a year, we're all, whether we're angry or bitter or resentful, we have to go through that.
That's
because we pictured the rest of our lives a different way. And when that dream or expectation goes away, you're so in shock, you feel like you do need to blame something.
That's right.
It's a natural visceral reaction. I think we just have to learn through that and come out of it with a greater realization of what not only is life about, but what the relationship meant and how it contributed to who we are. And if you look at it in a negative way, then you're also looking at your own growth in a negative way.
Yeah.
So you have to release that in order to turn everything, because we just need to do this as a species, into somehow a positive.
That's exactly right. All right. Now, so I've given you assignments to write a memoir. I'm always right about stuff like this. I should have been a job counselor. I always say this to you, but also your TEDx talks. We have to work on that. So Maria, I
don't like being in front of a camera.
Oh, you'll do it. I want you to come back in like 6 months and tell us what you've been working on. And if you do, whatever gets published, when you get if you're writing some more articles and they get published, please send them to me and we'll put them on the Woman Beyond a Certain Age page. We're going to put this one so that after they've been published, so that other people will see your work.
Oh, grateful. Thank you very much for that.
Because we have this one and we're going to put this up when we broadcast for you. I think that I think that it's very exciting, and to see the humor in life that's the best writing there is.
Yeah, to appreciate people and hear their stories. People just want to be heard.
That's exactly right. And there's a lesson for all of us.
Yes. We all have to find our purpose. We're all put here for a reason.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we seem to spend the rest of our lives trying to figure that out.
I know.
But along the way, what's important? Family, friends, faith, and service. And that's what I'm working on at this part in my life. How can I be of service in all sorts of ways? Yes.
I will thank Colleen for referring you to us again. And I can't tell you, I've enjoyed this, Maria, and we're going to talk again. I thank you so much for your time today. There were just jewels there of pearls of wisdom. Oh, I have to tell you one thing. I went to College of Marin with Robin Williams.
Oh, that's hysterical. Wow.
And this was the thing. The Vietnam War, it was 1969, 1970. He was a bartender at a little dump over, and it's such a funny story. His girlfriend had been became his first wife, was a ballet dancer. I danced in the Marin Civic Ballet. I mean, we kept going in little circles, but I knew him. He was lovely. But this was the most outstanding thing. He would get up at the student union and do 20 minutes. So he was like, whatever it was. He'd been working on being a comedian, but he would just get up on a table and start doing 20 minutes. And all of us would be watching him. And really? I'll never forget, and everybody called him Crazy Robin from Redwood, because that's where he went. And you know what? But I remember at that moment, and then I saw him in the bar and Valerie a few times, but I remember thinking, whatever he's going to do, he's going to be fantastic at it. Do you know what I mean? It was so obvious that when you said purpose, his purpose was to tell people observations.
Yes, and help them laugh. Laughter, as we know, is the best medicine. We need more of it.
Yep, need more of it. All right, madam. Thank you so much. For everyone who listens, when you go to the Women Beyond a Certain Age Facebook page, if you have questions, you can message us. It's womenbeyond@icloud.com. Thank you, Cindy. Cindy keeps the train on the track, does everything to make this happen. Maria, I can't thank you enough for your time. And I will thank Colleen, because you are so many words of wisdom here.
I appreciate that. And thank you for letting me know that. Women always love to be affirmed by other strong women.
Absolutely.
That means more to me.
We need compliments. Do you know what I mean? We need to compliment each other and mean it.
We don't lie.
No, that's exactly right.
Truthful to the women. Yes. You don't want anything from me other than the joy, hopefully, of each other's company. So when you say that to me, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone that listens, and we'll talk to you again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.